The biblical plagues, as recounted in religious texts, are seen as divine interventions intended to compel a change in behavior or to deliver a message of power and warning. These plagues brought immense suffering and chaos, demonstrating the might of a deity against those perceived as transgressors. In the context of ancient empires, such as Egypt, these plagues were narrated as pivotal events that destabilized society, disrupted economies, and forced rulers to reconsider their stance towards the Israelites, as in the famous story of the Exodus. The impact on ancient empires was profound due to the sheer scale of devastation, which ranged from ecological disasters to widespread health crises. The significance lies in how these plagues are perceived not just as historical or religious phenomena, but as foundational narratives that shape the mythology and collective memory of entire civilizations. They serve as metaphors for existential threats that can topple even the mightiest kingdoms, illustrating the vulnerability and ultimate fragility of human constructs in the face of higher powers. Two well-known examples include the Plague of Blood, where water sources supposedly turned into blood, disrupting daily life and agriculture, and the Plague of Locusts, which decimated crops, leading to widespread famine. Both illustrate the far-reaching impact of environmental disasters, an interpretation that resonates even today as societies grapple with climate change and resource scarcity. Supporters argue that these biblical accounts emphasize moral and ethical warnings, highlighting the need for repentance and humility. They see these narratives as lessons on the consequences of hubris and oppression. However, there are challenges to these interpretations, with skeptics pointing out the lack of empirical evidence and suggesting natural explanations for these events, such as algal blooms causing red water or locust swarms due to climatic conditions. Controversies also arise in the realm of interpretation. Literalists view them as factual events, underscoring divine authority, while others see them as allegorical stories meant to convey larger themes about justice, power, and survival. This dichotomy influences religious and cultural discourse, shaping how societies perceive history, divine intervention, and human responsibility. The concept of biblical plagues holds relevance within broader discussions of how ancient narratives influence modern faith and morality. They underscore the interconnectedness of belief systems, environmental stewardship, and socio-political structures, inviting ongoing dialogue about faith, history, and the human condition. The first plague, water turning to blood, is one of the most dramatic events recounted in the biblical narrative, particularly within the story of Exodus. It describes the transformation of the Nile River's water into blood, which left it undrinkable and caused widespread devastation in Egypt. This event is emblematic of divine intervention, showcasing a power beyond human control aimed at compelling Pharaoh to release the Israelites from slavery. The significance of this plague in toppling ancient empires lies in the vital role water sources like the Nile played in the sustenance and economic stability of civilizations. The Nile was the lifeblood of Egypt, crucial for agriculture, trade, and everyday life. When it turned to blood, this not only signified environmental and economic disaster, but also a profound spiritual and psychological blow to Egyptian society. It challenged the authority of Egyptian gods and the pharaoh, symbolizing a divine judgment and prompting a notable shift in power dynamics. In modern times, this narrative can be paralleled with environmental disasters affecting water resources, illustrating how crucial water remains for civilization's prosperity. The contamination of water in Flint, Michigan, is an example where toxic water led to a public health crisis, political turmoil, and legal battles, reminding us of the stark realities similar to ancient plagues. Another example is climate change-induced events, such as the increased frequency of algal blooms, which transform water bodies into toxic zones, affecting livelihoods and ecosystems, echoing the historical significance of water turning against civilization. The narrative of water turning to blood garners differing opinions. For some, it represents an allegorical tale, underscoring the consequences of environmental neglect or divine morality. For others, it sparks theological and historical debates regarding its literal truth versus symbolic interpretation. Skeptics contest the feasibility of such an event, suggesting natural explanations like red algal blooms or sediments giving the water a blood-like appearance, thereby challenging the narrative's supernatural elements. This plague intricately connects to other aspects of the main topic by highlighting a recurring theme: the vulnerability of human societies to natural phenomena perceived as acts of divine retribution. It sets the stage for the subsequent plagues, each escalating in intensity and demonstrating nature's overwhelming influence on empires. As a precursor to the freedom of the Israelites, it underscores a broader narrative of liberation and divine justice, forcing audiences to contemplate the intricate balance between humanity, nature, and the divine. The second plague, known for unleashing an overwhelming infestation of frogs across the land, is a vivid episode from the biblical accounts of the 10 plagues in Egypt. This plague is described in the book of Exodus, where swarms of frogs emerge from the Nile and overrun every corner of Egyptian life, infiltrating homes, beds, and even kitchens. This calamity serves as a symbol of nature's rebellion against human dominion, emphasizing the fragility of Pharaoh's power against divine intervention. The significance of the frog plague within the larger narrative of biblical plagues lies in its demonstration of systemic disruption. In ancient Egyptian culture, frogs were considered sacred due to their association with the goddess Heket, symbolizing fertility and new life. The plague's inundation of frogs, therefore, was not just a nuisance, but a profound religious affront, undermining societal and spiritual structures. Real-world parallels can be drawn with locust swarms that devastate modern agricultural economies, crippling livelihoods and food security in regions like East Africa. Similarly, recent concerns about invasive species disrupting ecosystems highlight the ongoing relevance of such phenomena. For instance, the proliferation of cane toads in Australia mirrors this biblical narrative, unleashing ecological chaos and challenging human efforts to control nature. Supporters analyzing this story often emphasize its allegorical lessons, that human arrogance in the face of natural forces can lead to downfall. The plague serves as a reminder of the limits of human control and the necessity for humility and respect towards the environment. However, this interpretation is not without its controversies. Some argue that the story is merely allegorical, dismissing the possibility of such divine interventions. Skeptics often seek natural explanations, suggesting, for instance, that environmental factors like climatic shifts could account for similar phenomena with no supernatural causation. Connecting this plague to other aspects of the main topic, the frog infestation sets a precedent for the remaining plagues, establishing a pattern of escalating devastation that ultimately shatters Pharaoh's resolve. Each subsequent plague builds on this theme of nature's uncontrollable power, further illustrating a divine hierarchy over human affairs. Thus, the second plague is not merely a tale of frogs inundating a land. It is a metaphor for the greater theme of divine retribution, encountering human hubris, an enduring story echoed in various forms throughout history's narrative of humanity versus nature. The third plague in the biblical narrative, which details the torment of lice or gnats, serves as a striking metaphor for widespread devastation. These minuscule creatures, typically harmless on their own, become overwhelmingly destructive in their massive numbers, causing widespread discomfort and chaos. In the biblical context, this plague was unleashed upon Egypt as a form of divine punishment, demonstrating not only the power of God, but also the vulnerability of mankind to even the smallest of creatures when nature turns hostile. The significance of the third plague lies in its demonstration of how small, seemingly insignificant forces can have monumental impacts on great empires. The lice or gnats plague underscores the theme of humility, reminding us that human strength and societal progress can abruptly be halted by forces beyond our control. Through this, the narrative reinforces the notion of divine retribution and the need for respect towards higher powers. In modern times, we find parallels in the locust swarms that devastate crops in parts of Africa and the Middle East, obliterating livelihoods and inducing food insecurity. Another example is the exponential growth of bedbug infestations in urban settings, causing economic strain and public health concerns. These examples demonstrate how small pests continue to challenge human ingenuity and management strategies, highlighting the need for vigilance and adaptation in pest control. Opinions supporting this idea often focus on the recognition of human limitations and the importance of humility. Scholars suggest that such narratives teach resilience and adaptability, urging societies to prepare for and mitigate natural disasters, whether they originate from climate change, ecological imbalances, or other sources. The third plague's influence extends to other biblical plagues, illustrating an escalating pattern of destruction that emphasizes the vulnerabilities of human civilizations. It serves as a foundational example of how a series of seemingly unrelated events can rapidly transform into crises that shape the destinies of entire cultures. Ultimately, this narrative of infestation connects to the broader themes of unpredictability and resilience within the context of ancient empires and beyond, encouraging a reflective examination of contemporary challenges.